let's start with something that might feel a little uncomfortable because we've all been there. You're in an IEP meeting, it's been a long day, everyone is ready to go, and then the document gets passed around for signatures. And in that moment, you're thinking, do I sign this or do I pause? Today is about giving you permission and, more importantly, the professional framework to pause when needed. Because signing an IEP is not just paperwork, it's accountability. By the end of today, you're going to walk away with something very practical. Not theory, not just compliance language, but real decision-making tools you can use immediately. You'll know when not to sign, how to identify risk, and how to advocate professionally without feeling like that person in the meeting. And let's be honest, every team needs that person sometimes. If the PLAF is weak, the entire IEP is built on shaky foundation. If the present levels don't reflect current data or don't match what you see in your classroom, that's a red flag. Here's the reality. If the data is wrong, the goals will be wrong, and the services will be wrong. And then guess who's responsible for implementing that? You. This is how you end up teaching reading goals to a student who's actually struggling with writing and wondering why nothing is working. If you see words like improve or increase with no number attached, pause. Because if you can't measure it, you can't monitor it. And if you can't monitor it, you can't defend it. From a compliance standpoint, measurable goals are not optional. From a real-world standpoint, this is what drives your instruction. No baseline equals no starting point. No criteria equals no finish line. And we don't run IEP marathons without a start or a finish line. As needed is one of the most dangerous phrases in an IEP. It sounds flexible, but in reality, it creates inconsistency and risk. If services don't clearly define frequency, duration, and location, you are left guessing. And in special education, guessing is not compliance. Administrators, this is where systems matter. Teachers, this is where implementation breaks down. If it's not clear on paper, it won't be clear in practice. This is where compliance meets reality. If the IEP says something that cannot actually be delivered, do not sign it, because once you sign it, you are legally responsible for implementing it. This includes unrealistic caseload expectations, impossible schedules, services that don't match staffing. This is how you end up being in 3 places at once, unless someone has figured out cloning, in which case, please share. If concerns were raised and not documented, that is a serious issue. Prior written notice must reflect what was discussed, including disagreements. Why does this matter? Because documentation protects the student, the team, and you as a professional. Silence in documentation creates legal vulnerability. If you don't understand what you're signing, don't sign it. That's not being difficult, that's being responsible. IEPs include complex terminology, services, and expectations. If anything is unclear, ask, because once implemented, I didn't understand is not a defense. So, what should you do instead of signing? Pause, ask questions, request revisions, document your concerns. This is not about slowing down the process. It's about improving the quality of the process. Strong teams don't rush IEPs. They build them correctly. Think of it this way. Would you rather take 10 extra minutes now or 10 extra hours fixing problems later? For administrators in the room, this is where leadership matters. Create a culture where staff feels safe asking questions. If teachers feel pressured to just sign, you will get compliance issues later. Support meaningful participation. Prioritize quality over speed, because fast IEPs are not always good IEPs. Let's make this very clear. Signing an IEP is not compliance. Signing an IEP is professional accountability. When you sign, you are saying, I understand this, I agree with this, and I can implement this. If any of those are missing, pause. Now let's bring this to your reality. Think about a time you felt unsure signing an IEP. What stopped you from speaking up? And more importantly, what would you do differently now? Because this is where real change happens, not in policy, but in practice. Before you leave, I want you to commit to one thing. Name one scenario where you will pause before signing, and one action you will take when something doesn't feel right. Because at the end of the day, this is not just about compliance. It's about ensuring every IEP is something we can stand behind with confidence. I want to close with this. Everything we talked about today, when to sign, when not to sign, when to pause, it all comes down to one thing: professional responsibility grounded in data. That's why I call this Data King. Because in special education, data is not just numbers on a page. It's what protects our students, guides our instruction, and ensures compliance. When your decisions are backed by clear, accurate data, your IEPs are stronger, your goals are defensible, your services are aligned, and your voice carries weight at the table. But when data is weak, unclear, or missing, everything else starts to fall apart. So as you leave today, I want you to think like a data king in your own role. Before you sign any IEP, ask yourself, does this reflect real current data? Can this be implemented with fidelity? Am I confident standing behind this as a professional? If the answer is no, that's your moment to pause, because signing an IEP is not just a formality. It's your professional signature on a legally binding, student-centered plan. And strong professionals don't rush that process. They lead it. If this session connected with you, I'd love to keep the conversation going. Join the network, connect, and let's continue building stronger, more compliant, and more effective IEP practice together. Because at the end of the day, when data leads, students succeed. Thank you and goodbye.